Welcome, everyone. Thanks for showing up on a summer Friday to talk about dissertations and APA formatting. I know it's not everybody's favorite topic all of the time, and my goal today is to talk about the things that you're going to want to know no matter what point in the dissertation process you're at. The things you want to know to think about for formatting to make sure that your dissertation meets both APA style guidelines and Alliant specific guidelines for some parts of the dissertation. So I'll be focusing a lot on the things that I see the most often on dissertations that come in for clearance that tend to occasionally trip students up. So I am in the wrong window. There we go. Okay, so first things first, I want to make sure that you know about this website. It's from the library's homepage, which is library.alliant.edu. And I'm going to put it in the chat box really quick because it's not up there. Let me add those HTTPs. You'll see a link called Dissertation Clearance underneath Services, which is the center column on that page, or here is the direct link as well. Okay, so there's the library homepage. So I want you to know about this because it is a place that is going to have a lot of information that you're going to want, particularly after you defend and you get ready for those final steps of clearance submitting to the library. Have instructions on that part, the forms that you're going to want to submit, and then before we even get to that point, things like our formatting manual, a template in Word that you can actually use to just put all of your wonderful content in directly. We also have a tab on there for editors that students have used in the past. So if you're somebody who knows that you're not a big fan of APA style or not a big fan of Word and you know you're going to want to use an editor, that tab has information on people that they've used in the past. And then we have contact info for the person who handles library clearance at all of our campuses, including the online campus. That's on that right-hand side of the page. So keep, go ahead, bookmark this page now so that you can come back to it whenever you need it. And, oh boy, now I'm going too fast. Okay, so I'm going to start with some of the basics. And in this case, these are APA style, but I'm going to specifically talk about how they relate to appearing in your dissertation, which is sometimes just a small bit different. Right now, APA style is kind of still in the process of transitioning from 6th to 7th edition. So what you'll see on that library clearance website, the formatting manual and the template are still 6th edition. The 7th edition one is going through kind of its final approvals and should be up by the end of the summer. Right now, the library is accepting both. Your program may have different, different requirements and ask you to use one or the other, and if so, do that. All that we really ask is pick one and stick with it. Unless you are all planning on on defending and clearing in the next couple weeks, chances are the university will have fully moved over to 7th edition by then. So I'll be mostly focusing on that. There aren't a ton of differences, and most of them actually kind of work in your favor in ways that make it a little bit easier, but I'll be highlighting some of those. So line spacing, everything in your dissertation and your paper should be double spaced. That includes block quotes, which I'll talk about later, and it also includes references. Some people single space their references, and please don't do that. They should be double spaced just like this. There are samples of that in the formatting manual and in that template, so you can kind of see what that would look like. Your margin should be 1 inch all the way around. That includes the left and right margins. Word, sometimes, I'll be saying this potentially a lot in the next several minutes. Word sometimes likes to have its own defaults that aren't necessarily the same as what we want. I see 1 1/4 inch kind of pop up a lot. So be sure to double check your document for that to make sure that they are those 1 inch all the way around. Anytime I talk about doing something in Word, here, because some things are, you probably change the settings on or work with the settings a lot, and some you might not as much. Anytime you are trying to figure out how to do a thing in Word, we can help answer some of those questions, but what I generally suggest to students is that they Google, how do thing I want to do in Word, your specific version of Word. And the reason for that is that different versions of Word, some of the functions work a little bit differently. And if I try to explain like over the phone what I'm doing, or even show you on a screen share what I'm doing, it's just not gonna look the same on your computer. The computer that I am on working from home, a lot of things like page numbering and margin, a lot of it looks real different from my computer in the office. And I know that that is often the case whenever I'm talking to any of you. There are really good tutorials online. Office themselves has some really, really great tutorials, and I'll often send people links to those, and they've found them helpful in the past. So that's kind of my go-to advice for trying to figure out how to do stuff in Word. But we're also willing to point you in the right direction and try to help. As far as typeface and font goes, our current formatting manual, because the 6th edition, says Times New Roman 12 point, which is the highlighted one here. 7th edition APA style has broadened their options for a range of kind of accessibility, look and feel reasons. And so they've added some additional fonts that they think are good ones to consider using. Our formatting manual, unless it changes at the very last minute, will also use the same language. So dissertations will potentially, as long as your chair is okay with it, can use these other ones. I still kind of recommend 12 point Times New Roman because it's probably what you're the most used to working with. And it's a nice kind of general default state. But if you are an Arial person or a Georgia person, go for it. One thing I will say is that Word, again, often has default fonts. And even if you set your text to be something like Times New Roman, sometimes your header and your page number will be this different default. So you want to go through and double check those to make sure that they're the same font as everything else. Headings. All headings of equal importance are given the same heading level. So because you're going to have, you're writing a very long document, and even within the chapters, some of those are going to be pretty long and have a lot of sections, and some of those sections will have subsections. You'll be using headings and potentially using a lot more levels of subheadings than you have in a lot of your other papers. That said, only use as many heading levels as you really need to help with the flow and readability of your paper, and only start using subsections when you can divide that section into 2 or more subsections. So if you only have a single subheading for a specific section, you don't need to use it. And on my next slide, I have, and I know it's probably teeny tiny on your screen, but I have kind of side to side 6th edition and 7th edition headings. And they are relatively similar, but there are a few differences. So if you are going to be using your headings, take a look at this. The sample is in the formatting manual. It's also in that template document in Word. Right now, again, the one on the webpage is 6th edition. We'll be adding the 7th edition one, I believe, shortly. But if you also want it, you can send me an email and I can share that with you as well. On the kind of unofficial one while we're still waiting for it. But your chapter title is going to have a heading. That one doesn't change at all. The first level 2 that first subheading level 2, that left align one hasn't changed at all. The big change is that all of the headings now use what's called title case capitalization, where all of the words except for small words like and, in, the, if it's not the first word, will be, all of the big words will be capitalized. So you don't have to worry about remembering to change the capitalization. And they've also changed when things are italicized starting with level 3 and when they're indented starting with level 3. You can see those examples there, and we can talk more about them later if you have more questions. Tables and figures, depending on what kind of dissertation you're doing, there's a really good chance that you will have tables and or figures somewhere in there. Anything that you're doing, if you're doing quantitative stuff, it's almost 100% guaranteed that there will be tables in there and statistical charts and all sorts of fun stuff. Your tables should be numbered consecutively and your figures should be consecutive 1, 2, 3, and you're going to put them into your document immediately after they're first mentioned in the text. Don't wait and put them all together at the end, say in an appendix or right before or after your references. They're going to go be incorporated into the text. So they'll normally be on the same page as when they're first mentioned. But if putting it right after where it's mentioned is going to cause your table to break over 2 pages, go ahead and bump it down to the next page so that it is all on one page. The big thing that I end up saying a lot about tables are APA style likes to have as few lines as you can get away with. They believe it improves readability and makes it more accessible and understandable. So that said, that means don't use vertical lines in your table at all. Word will want to put them in there if you're using Word for a table, but go ahead and take them out. You can use that borders and shading feature in Word for that. And also make sure all of your columns have a heading, even the far left or stub column that you're essentially kind of labeling those variables that'll be on the left-hand side. That one needs a heading as well. And then tables can be all sorts of different things: charts, drawings, photos, diagrams, whatever, pie charts, whatever they are. They will kind of go in and you'll put in the figure and the figure title. And if you need a note describing it, you can add it in there, just like in this example. I am going to interrupt myself because I do see a question in the chat about 6th and 7th edition. As far as I know, at least through December 31st, the library will be using both 6th and 7th, we'll be accepting both 6th and 7th edition. Again, do one or the other. I do also know, though, that some programs have kind of made that like, yes, you can technically do both, but we already want you to use 7th. Or yes, you can technically do both, but we still want you to use 6th. Or your chair might have a real strong opinion on it, in which case go ahead and do that. But as far as the library is concerned, unless you start to see or hear otherwise from us, we will accept 6th edition and 7th edition through the end of the year. We're going to talk about table of contents. I see a question about table of contents too. We're going to get to that a little bit later. Oh, it's almost right now. So I want to talk about the preliminary pages of your dissertation. Those are all the things that come from the title page up until the first word of chapter 1. And here we go with them. So here is the title page. You'll see samples all over the place. There is no running head on your title page or page number on your title page. This is the only page in your document that's not going to have those. There is a feature in Word called different first page. For headers, that's what you'll want to use. You also want to include your committee member names on your title page. In this example, you can see the 3 committee members down at the bottom underneath and approved by. This is not going to change from 6th to 7th edition, so don't worry about that. We don't have a signature page in the dissertation anymore, so if you are looking at some older ones, you might see that, but we have replaced that with your clearance form that your committee signs, and so your committee members' names are going to appear here on the title page. But I mentioned that one doesn't have a running head. Every other page in your document is going to have one. Your running head will be an abbreviated title, 50 characters or less, characters including spaces, and it should be in all caps. So I'm going to go back up. For example, an abbreviated title for this sample title page might be something like EBT : therapist perspectives or something like that. It shouldn't be just the first 50 characters of your title. I'm not going to keep you from clearing if it is, but the whole point of the abbreviated title is to kind of make it easy to identify and recognize what's going on in there. You don't want to include the phrase running head and a colon before your abbreviated title the first time you put it, the first time it appears in your document or any other time. That is always been the case in our dissertation. That's an Alliant specific guideline as far as APA 6th edition goes. APA 7th edition has gotten rid of it altogether. So it turns out Alliant was a little bit ahead of the curve on that. But we're not going to see the words running head anywhere in your running head unless for some reason running head is somehow part of your dissertation's title. The header should be within that 1-inch margin or header. Word's going to do that for you, and it'll be even with the page number. And again, you're going to put it on every single page of your document except for the title page. Page numbering is another place where that can trip people up a little bit, and it is a little bit different. Our preliminary pages use lowercase Roman numerals, such as the examples here. That first page, your title page, doesn't have a number on it, but we do consider it to be page 1 or page lowercase I. So the page following it will be page 2. And for a lot of people, that'll be the copyright page, which is optional. You'll see a list of the optional components in the formatting manual. I'm not going over those today, although we can talk about them if there are specific questions. For some people, it's that. For others, it might be the dedication, which is also optional, or the acknowledgements, also optional, or they might skip straight to the abstract. So the body of the dissertation, starting with the first page of chapter 1 and everything that comes after it, including the references, including any appendices that you have, should be numbered using Arabic numerals, the 1, 2, 3 we're used to. The first page of chapter 1 will be page 1. So you might go up, you might have 9 preliminary pages, so your final preliminary page is IX. The following page is the first page of chapter 1, and it goes back to 1. It's not page 10, it's page 1. And Word will help you make that happen as well. And again, like I said, everything after the first page of chapter 1 uses Arabic numerals. Don't go back to those lowercase Roman numerals for your references or appendices. They just keep going with the flow from there. Your abstract is just a brief overview of your dissertation. It should be brief, 250 to 350 words. A lot of journals have a limit, so if you're planning on turning your dissertation into a journal article for submission to a publication, when you go to submit it, at the very least, be sure to check and see what their guidelines are. ProQuest, where your dissertation is going to be published, used to have a 350 word limit. They have removed that, so we aren't as beholden to that anymore, but you still want to keep it relatively brief. A general good rule of thumb is to keep it on one page. Some of them will go over because of the way they're formatted and the information you need to share, but don't go too wild, I think, with making it long. It's also just one more thing you have to write. It'll be formatted just like the rest of your paper, double-spaced, 1-inch margins, all of that. The thing that is an Alliant specific guideline about the abstract is not to include listed keywords at the bottom of your abstract. You don't need to do that. You'll give ProQuest some keywords, but you don't need to put keywords on your Word document there. Here comes the table of contents, and I'm going to try to circle back to the table of contents question at this point. It's going to include all of the major sections of your document, so chapters and then headings and subheadings, as well as appendices are they're incorporated into your table of contents. It'll include the title of each appendix. Your chapters use uppercase Roman numerals. So we have Roman numerals in all sorts of different places here. So uppercase ones, I, V, VI if you have a 6-chapter dissertation, which most people don't, but it happens. And then appendices will be sequenced using letters, starting with A, so A, B, C, D, etc. You can see in the sample here, we have put the subheadings. They are formatted in unbolded, but still more or less APA style for the headings. But they aren't, that isn't 100% necessary. So this is a 6th edition one. The formatting manual and guidelines, the template for the 7th edition will have 7th 7th edition style ones, but it'll look more or less like this. What's important is that you have the headings and the subheadings there with their title, their names, the headings themselves, and their page numbers. So yeah, there isn't, I believe that there isn't really a APA, off the top of my head, I don't believe there is an APA style like this is what table of contents should look like. It's something that it's one of the areas where they kind of allow institutions to kind of create their own deal. We don't necessarily have some super strict guidelines if you look through our formatting manual about exactly what the look and feel is of it, as long as it includes all of the major sections of your document, the titles and the page numbers of them, and you can kind of make it clear in some sort of way whether a heading, a section that appears in there is the title of the chapter or is a subheading or a subheading, so that it's clear if somebody is looking through your table of contents, they can figure out what they're looking for and how to get to it. After your table of contents, you'll include a list of tables and a list of figures. So this is a separate page or pages if you have both tables and figures. Your list of tables will include the table and its number, the full name of the table, and the page number that it's on. And the same thing if it's a figure instead. So even if you just have one single table or one single figure, we want that list there with all of the information for where someone will go to find it. Both of these are good places where I'm just going to make a note as you're finalizing your dissertation, getting it ready to submit to the library for a formatting clearance, the whole thing. Double check this part pretty much last, both your table of contents and your list of tables and list of figures, to make sure that the page numbers that are listed for those are correct. As you're editing and moving things around, sometimes they can change, and you might have used Word's automatic setup for how Word will kind of automatically create a table of contents for you using styles, which I have failed miserably at, I will admit, every time I've used it, but I know lots of people use it and love it. It should change the page numbers automatically for you if you make any changes, but if you've done it manually, you definitely want to double check it. And even if you've used the Word to do it automatically, you want to double check it too, because sometimes glitches happen in it. You just want to make sure that those page numbers that are listed are correct. I am going to pause for just a second and kind of wrap up the overall guidelines and the page, the preliminary pages, and we're going to spend the rest of the time that I'm talking at you talking about citations and references. And I did see a couple names. I can't see all of the list of the participants right now, but I did see a couple names for people who have seen my APA style presentation on the LA campus in the past. So some of this will look a little familiar to you, and hopefully a lot of it will look familiar to the rest of you because you've been writing papers in APA style for at least a little while. So we're going to talk about in-text citations first. Anytime you have you cite something in the text, you're going to include both the author and the date. The author and the date should always go together. So if you mention your author kind of in the flow, like within the sentence, in the flow of the text, you will interrupt that with the parentheses to put in the year. Or if you don't mention the author within your sentence, you will put the author and the date together at the end of the sentence or paragraph. Formatting authors. This screen is technically 7th edition. I'll point out the difference between where it is different between 6th and 7th right here. And so it gives you a sense whether you have one author, 2, 3, or 4, or a group, how it'll look if the author appears within the parentheses or if it's a narrative citation, like I mentioned before. Kind of a big difference that people occasionally goof on is that if there are 2 authors and you're using and, in the narrative citation, you will write out the word and, but if it is just appearing in the parentheses, you'll use an ampersand. For 3 or more authors, in 6th edition, 3 to 5 authors, you're going to list all of 3, 4, or 5 of them the first time that you cite that work. Any subsequent time that you cite them, you can just use the lead author and then et al. Starting with 7th edition, anytime you have 3 or more authors, you skip straight to et al. From the very first mention, which is, I think, kind of exciting because that just saves you some typing, if nothing else, and then having to go back and remember, is this the first time I cited them? Did I cite them before? Now I've made some edits, and so this wasn't the first time I cited them, but now maybe it is, and not having to worry about that will be exciting, I think. It sounds great for me, thinking back to my grad school days. If you are citing kind of a group or organizational author and you can abbreviate their title, such as the National Institute of Mental Health is my example in my chart, APA is another good example. The first time you cite them or mention them, you'll spell out their full name and then give the abbreviation in parentheses or brackets if you're already within a parenthesis. And then anytime after that you cite them, you can just use the abbreviation. If there's no real way to abbreviate it, such as, say, Stanford University in this example, you won't abbreviate it. If you have a block quote, I specifically stopped to talk about these because this is a place where sometimes people, this is something that I see as like a semi-common thing that needs to be changed in the dissertations that come across my desk. Anytime you use a quotation of 40 words or more, you're gonna use a block quote, and that means indenting the whole thing in a half inch. So that half inch is the same amount as you indent a paragraph, for example. And you keep it double spaced. So a lot of times you might want to make it single spaced. I think some other non-APA styles will single space those block quotes. In this case, they will stay double spaced. One other thing to note is that the punctuation goes in a different place. I think you're used to, as you cite things, you always remember to put the punctuation, that period or comma, whatever it is, at question mark maybe, at the end of the sentence after the parenthetical citation. With block quotes, it goes before it. I'm still not sure why, but it is one of those small things that you'll want to go through and double check. And moving on to references. So I'm not going to go through each one and be like, and then you put the author's name, and this is how you format it, and this is how you spell out book titles. But I will kind of have a screen, I think, for each of the ones that appear the most often, and go over a couple things that I tend to see as most common mistakes, and then point you towards where I would have you go other than the actual physical book itself to go look for examples when you're formatting your own that you can use as a model to copy off of. A lot of this will hopefully look relatively familiar, but I will point out the things that I tend to see the most often that get sent back to students with requests to fix. And the main one is sentence case capitalization. And what is that? Sentence case capitalization differs from title case capitalization in that it is capitalized just like you capitalize sentences. So that means that only the first word of the title, the first word of a subtitle, if there is one, and then proper nouns are capitalized. And so I have an example here, and you can see only the words sleep and seeking are capitalized. And then title case capitalization is what you're using in most of your headings now. And that's all of the words except for little words will be capitalized. So in the example here, you'll see only and in are lowercase. Everything else is capitalized. Almost all titles in your references are going to use sentence case capitalization. Article titles, book titles, web report titles, chapter titles, all of those use sentence case capitalization. The only titles that I can think of while I'm saying this that use title case capitalization are journals. So when you're referencing a journal article, the article title uses sentence case capitalization, the journal title uses title case. And this is a place where if you're using something that is like an automated website, Google Scholar, or Son of Citation Machine, or EBSCO, or whatever you're using to kind of create your citations, this is a place where it tends to mess up a little bit because it's only as good as the information that it's given. So even if you're not handwriting all of your citations from scratch yourself, you want to know this well enough to be able to look through your list and make the corrections where they appear. So here's an example of a periodical in its format. So you can see here again, you have the author and the year. My article title uses sentence case capitalization. The title of my periodical is italicized and uses title case capitalization. My volume number is also italicized. Then I have an issue number and page number. And then it's followed by either the DOI, or if it's a journal that has the URL, like homepage where you got that journal article from, you can put that instead or as well. And I want to talk about DOIs. The DOI, it stands for Digital Object Identifier. It is kind of like the social security number of your journal article. And then pretty much all journal articles that are out there right now are assigned one. A lot of specific chapters and books themselves will also have them. Anytime there is a DOI, it should always be included in your reference list. This is another place where some of those automated citation creators will drop the ball and leave off a DOI, and then you need to remember to go and add it back in. The preferred formatting for how a DOI looks has changed over time. In the 6th edition, they finished out by saying, hey, the Crossref, the folks behind DOI, now want to do it this way, and that's the way that is on the screen here that starts with the HTTPS and then doi.org and then the set of numbers and letters. But we'll still accept 2 other ways. Starting with 7th edition, this is all they want to see, and that's why it's all that I put on the screen, because it is also correct for 6th edition. It's what I'd like to see you use. If for some reason, if you do want to use, you're kind of getting in under that 6th edition wire, and you do want to use one of the other approved formats, go ahead, just make sure that you're using the same one all the way throughout, that you don't have some of your references look like this, others have the DOI colon and then the DOI, others have a differently formatted URL. Standardize it, make it all the same, preferably this way, and then once we switch to 7th edition, like 100%, or if you're using 7th edition, it should look this way. Books, again, books might have DOIs too, but books, you'll have the author and year. Your book title is going to be italicized and also use sentence case capitalization. And then the publisher, something that has changed in the 7th edition is they have removed the publisher location. So that city and state or city and country that you put in there is gone. So I took it out on this slide, but if you're using 6th edition, you can put, remember to put in that the publisher is in London, UK, or New York, or wherever. A DOI question that just popped up. If you aren't using the URL format, does DOI need to be capitalized? It should not be. It should be in lowercase. But honestly, if you have it all caps and you're consistent about it, I'm not gonna, I wouldn't keep you from, I wouldn't send that back to you as your only mistake. I've seen publications come out that way. So that wouldn't stop you, but it should be lowercase if you're doing it that other way. Oops, and now I'm going the wrong direction. Book chapters. They're kind of like a mashup of an article, of the way periodical references look and the way book references look. The important thing to note is that both the chapter title and the book title are sentence case capitalization. The chapter is not italicized, the book is italicized, and then they add in PP as an abbreviation before the page numbers, which is something that is kind of unique to book chapter references only, and I'm not sure why, but there it is. Again, when you're doing these, go and grab yourself a model, whether it is this slide or the example on APA Style's website, or the book, if you have the manual physically in front of you, the manual itself, and then kind of copy through it. Electronic sources look almost more or less like a book title, or like a book citation, more or less. Your author and your year, your title will be italicized. The website name, if it's different from the author, like if you're citing a post by such and such person, but it's on CNN's website, you would put CNN there, and then the URL where you got it from. If you have a source that stumps you, go check the APA Styles website and their blog first is my recommendation. You can, of course, also contact us. I am happy to get emails about those questions. Our chat reference on the library's website, we also get a decent amount of reference questions that come in through there, and we're happy to get those, but this is a good place to go. They have so many examples. They have and this is something that I'm really impressed with how they have set it up for the 7th edition. I found it really, really user-friendly, and I rely on it a lot when people ask questions about what about a gray paper? How do I cite that? Or I had a recent question where someone was asking how to cite a TED Talk. And I thought about it, I'm like, well, it's a video, so you'd cite it like a video. And then I was like, but let me check the website and see. And sure enough, APA Style specifically says how to cite a TED Talk, and they have specific examples there. And it turns out that it depends on whether or not you watch that video on TED's website or on YouTube. You'll do it differently depending on that. But all I had to do is send that to the student and say, hey, where'd you find the video? And they were all set up. So it's a really great resource. The blog goes into even more details and examples of all sorts of different things that may come up as you're writing your papers, your dissertation, your articles in the future, whatever it is that you're making in APA Style. Chances are that they have something to say about it already. And then this is my last slide, so that we have plenty of time for questions. What happens if I'm looking at the APA Style manual and I'm looking at the Alliance formatting manual and they seem to contradict each other? They seem to say something different. What do I do then? And which one's right? And the answer is that it depends. The best thing to do is to check with one of us. Check with the person who handles library clearance for your campus. Because there are places, and we've talked about a couple of them in the last half hour, where there are university-specific dissertation formatting guidelines. It's something that where APA Style, we have either kind of chosen to override it, or where APA Style kind of sends that authority on to the institution to make their own guidelines for. So our title page, we have very specific guidelines for that maybe don't line up perfectly with APA Style. Page numbering, we do a little bit different. The formatting manual does actually specifically specify here are the places where we are different from APA Style. But we might not be, we're definitely not perfect, and it may not be a 100% thorough list. No matter how thorough we think we are, things tend to pop up. This was true for APA Style, which is why 6th edition in the 10 years that it was around kind of had so many kind of addendums to it that you could kind of only find on the website. So we'll see how long it takes 7th edition to do the same thing. But yeah, check with us. We'll let you know how we think it should look, how we want to see it. And sometimes the answer might be, actually, you could kind of do it either way. But check with us if you have questions about that or anything else. So I think I probably talked a little bit fast, but I wanted to get all of that in quickly so that I had time to answer people's specific questions, because I tend to find that no matter how good I am at trying to anticipate what people want to talk about the most, and in this case I talked about what I wanted to talk about the most, which were the things I tend to send back to people the most often, it's not necessarily the questions that you have. So please go ahead and put them in the chat, or I guess Amber can help unmute people if they want to ask them in person. Oh, one question that's come up while you're doing that is, will we be able to access this PowerPoint later? And my answer to that is that I don't know. I know that the session is being recorded, so you'll definitely be able to see the PowerPoint on the recording, but I don't know that we couldn't.
Yeah, Erin, what we're hoping to do is not only the recording of the presentation, but we'll actually take your actual PowerPoint and put that up in the presentation. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm imagining probably as a PDF so that you don't have to open PowerPoint just to look at it. But yeah.
Exactly.
Smaller version intended in the page. Okay, there is a question about tables. I believe that our formatting manual says that tables shouldn't go smaller than 10 point. So some things that here are things that I've seen people do that are fine. One is if it's that the table is wide, some people will put it on that next page and have it alone on a page in the middle of your document and have that page be landscape instead of portrait so that it can be nice and wide and everything can be read. That's one thing. Sometimes depending, there may be reasons I'm going to go ahead and say that there are probably times that people will use smaller, like kind of a condensed version of the most important parts of the table I'm presenting here. But hey, if you want to see a bunch of data, you can go look in the appendix. That's something that happens too. And then sometimes there are just ones where a table might have a lot of rows. So many rows that there's no way to make it small enough to appear on a single page. And those will go over multiple, like 2 or occasionally even 3 pages if there are a lot of them, and that's fine. But there's no reason for a table that has like 4 columns and like 6 rows to be over two pages and, force your reader to kind of scroll back and forth. So go ahead and just bump those ones down. When will Alliant switch to 7th edition exclusively? That is a question that I have no control over. I believe that the language that I have seen is December 31st of this year. Anything that goes through library clearance by that date, but that is not set in stone. You'll see it will be posted on the dissertation clearance page and probably sent out via email too, but it will for sure be posted on the dissertation clearance page what that is, so you can double check there. You can also just ask one of us. There will probably be some amount of wiggle room too. Sometimes things lose page numbering. How do we fix that? I don't know. I'm sorry, that is not a helpful answer at all. Probably trial and error, and it might mean it depends on what you're pasting in there. Some people have PowerPoint presentations that they include the slides, and copy and pasting in those creates things, or tables will create weird things. Sometimes just turning those into an image and inserting that as an image fixes it. It probably depends on an individual situation, and that's probably another good one. That might be a Googleable, hey Office, tell me how to do this. But if you have a specific example that you're thinking of, feel free to email it to me, or if you're not in LA, to the person on your campus, and we'll try to answer that for you. I'm going to kind of reword Sarah's question to how long does clearance take? So when you finish your successful defense and make any changes that your committee requires, they will sign off on a clearance form, which will either be a paper form, a PDF form that they insert electronic signatures on, or a DocuSign form. And potentially it'll eventually be at the point where if you're not defending for another year or two, it might only be a DocuSign form, which is super helpful and convenient, and is especially great right now where we're all at home or wherever else we might be that isn't on campus. Once everyone signs that gets to me, either automatically through DocuSign or sent by you if not DocuSign. I'm going to ask for, if you're working with me, for example, I'm just going to use me as how it's going to work. I'm going to ask for that and your cataloging form, which is a form that you'll find on the clearance website. Anytime that you get in touch with us, we'll reply to you probably within about a business day, letting you know, kind of confirming what's happening and letting you know what happens next. Once we have your forms, we'll tell you to submit your document to ProQuest for the formatting review. Once you do that, We'll review it. Our website says around 3 business days, I believe. I generally aim for 1 to 2. If for some reason we're backed up and it might take a little longer, we'll let you know right away so that you know about how long to expect. And then if you have revisions you need to make, you'll make those. Switch up the PDF that's in ProQuest with your new and improved PDF, and then we'll review it again. We go back and forth through that. So the question for how long it takes is, which is not the question that is in the chat, is it depends a lot on you and how long it takes you to do your part of each step in the process. I've had people do the whole thing in 1 day. I've had people do it over months. But you should expect to hear back from us within about a day for any of those parts. DocuSign, once you start the DocuSign, you can let us know that you've started it, but it might take a while to get to us because it has to route through all of your committee and your program director first. So, you know, sometimes that can take a little while, depending on how quick they're checking their email and clicking on that link. ProQuest sometimes, especially if you put in a non-Alliant email address into ProQuest, it'll bounce, the results of it will bounce into your spam folder, so you want to double check it. I generally tell people that if they haven't heard back from ProQuest within about 2 to 3 days, to check back in with their clearance person, just to see what's going on, because it might be that something weird happened. Either you didn't get that email and the review happened, or that you thought you pressed submit, but ProQuest didn't think you pressed submit, so we never found out that you submitted it, something weird. So check back in anytime you haven't heard about the next step within about 2 to 3 days. Timeline for turning in your stuff after you defend, not really. Like, I don't care when you do it, but you do have to remain enrolled in dissertation or dissertation extension until you finish library clearance. So you're not done being registered until you're done with this part. That is generally good incentive to do it shortly after you defend and make any changes that your committee asks, rather than putting it off for a while, because you don't want to continue to have to register and pay tuition credits when you're done with everything but these kind of last crossing T's and dotting I's. There are specific due dates that are relevant to what, like, I need to get it done by this point in order to avoid registering for this term. Those will vary depending on what your term you're talking about. So the best person to talk to about that is your advisor. Especially because some people have individual circumstances but you can also ask us and we'll answer it as well as we can. Page numbers. Page numbers are hard. I don't even know which version of Word that is. Usually just, I would say something like formatting page numbers in Word 16.39. That is how I would Google it. If that's what you're doing and you're having trouble, send us an email and we can try to find something. Another option is to grab that template that is on the library's dissertation clearance page. I am going to go back to my PowerPoint and scroll very fast because there are a lot of things happening on my computer screen. Go to this page. In the formatting manuals tab, that second tab over down towards the bottom of it is a template. Oh, YouTube. Yes, YouTube also has great formatting tips because you can actually see people do it in the video. But again, you have to find a version of Word that is close enough to yours that when they're like, click on this thing that's up in the upper left-hand corner and it turns out it's not in the upper left on yours, it's like over to the right or something. That used to be very frustrating for me. I think they've gotten better. Like, it's a little more standardized and it's a little easier to find your specific example. But I distracted myself. At the bottom of the formatting manual tab is the Word template. And in your case, where page numbers are just, you're fighting so much with them, it might be easier just to use that template and kind of grab it, do a save as, and put your stuff into it where the page numbers have already been formatted and created. Okay. Oh, good. I am glad that that helps. I can try to pull up a link. It might mean that I don't make much sense for a minute, but I can try to pull up a link to Office's tutorials on it. And this is Microsoft Office you're working with, right? Not OpenOffice or something, some other word processor that I don't know. Because if that's the case, then Google should still fix this problem for you, but I don't necessarily know how. Okay, I am pasting in the chat a very ugly looking link that should show how to insert page numbers. Well, from there, you can use search in there to kind of do some other fun things. Oh my gosh, there are so many different versions of Word, but none of them show specifically the number that I'm assuming that your version of Word is Word 2016. Yeah, I'm going to guess it is 2016. So 2016 or 2016 for Mac, depending on what you're on. Go ahead and give that a try. Other questions? There have been so many of them, and you guys have done such a good job you all have done a really good job of stumping me a few times, but I haven't seen any that I haven't been completely unable to at least point in a direction, so that's good.
Erin, would you be comfortable putting your contact information in that? And then, maybe as people walk away and go, oh, this is what I really wanted to ask. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I realized as I was opening up PowerPoint today at 1:57 or whatever it is, that the slide that has my contact info on it from previous iterations, non-dissertation versions of this disappeared, and it wasn't on there. It's like, I'm going to have to remember to put it in the chat, and I still almost forgot, so thank you. But you can also find my info on this library clearance webpage on that right-hand side of the first page, and I think it's under every single tab are all of our contacts. So absolutely, no matter where you are, feel free to contact me. You can also contact the person from your campus who you'll be working more directly with if you feel more comfortable doing so. You can also find our contact info anywhere on the library webpage too. So if you didn't grab my name, my email right here, you can find it elsewhere. Notes in tables and figures double spaced. I believe they are single spaced. That is something that is definitely in the formatting manual. So you can double check me to make sure, 100% sure that that is the case, but I believe they're single spaced. That is another one where, quite honestly, I think of our formatting review, we are not copy editors, so we're not going over this line by line, word by word. We're not going to notice if you have a comma in the wrong place, probably, but I kind of liken it to being sort of like a driver's exam. And it's described in the formatting manual or on the website, I forget which place, maybe both, as being sort of a spot check. I think of it as being a little bit like a driver's exam. There are a couple small little things, like if you have a period in the wrong place and a block quote, I'm not going to stop you from publishing that. I'm not going to make you be registered longer for that. But there are a few things that absolutely need to be right. Like your title page has to have your name on it and has to have your committee member's name on it and needs to not have the running head. Your page numbers need to not be some totally different thing and on the bottom of the page. Not a formatting question. How do we access an article that is not accessible through library search? This is great because now you can leave the meeting anytime you want, but you're kind of a captive audience that I can tell. There are a couple different things that you can try to do.
One is if you are only searching EBSCO, you can try to broaden your search from the library homepage. If you click on the listed databases, on the right-hand side is a citation finder, and it has both kind of find by full citation and find by DOI. You can try to use it, and if it can figure out what article you're talking about and we have it, it'll pull it up, because maybe it's just not in an EBSCO database, but it is in a different one that we have. If it can figure out what it is, but we don't have it, it'll take you to a screen that has a couple different links, one of which says, can't find it, click here to request it for free. Or if it can't figure out what it is, it'll kind of shrug at you and be like, I don't know what article you mean. So in that case, you can do one of a couple different things. And you know what? I think, can I new share? I can.
I need to let you know we've got about 90 seconds left, and then you need to end the presentation.
Okay, I will do that. Okay, so from the library homepage, there are a couple different places you can go. Instead of emailing us, which is also always an option, you can go underneath services. You can't see this page, can you? It said you can, but then it didn't share. Switch over. There we go. Under services, you can click on interlibrary loan, which is about halfway down, and put in an interlibrary loan request there. You can just email us either as an individual or email the email address library@alliant.edu. You can use chat. All of these are great options. If it's 3 in the morning, you're probably not going to be able to use chat, but you can definitely email us or put in a request at interlibrary loan. And we'll help you either put in that request yourself, or maybe we'll be able to find it and tell you what we did.
Great. And I think we're going to end on the positive note of Andrew's got the shout out to the chat support option. He giving it some props there. Again, I'm glad to see we've got great questions, but we do need to end this webinar. We want to thank Erin very much for being our presenter today, and thank all of you for
thank you.
Friday afternoon with us for our dissertation support Power Hour series. We will have this, not only the presentation as a PDF, but also this recorded session on our dissertation toolbox sometime next week. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.